Hi, I am Sophia. Welcome to True Payback, where story hits different. Hit subscribe. Let's dive in.
The Grandview estate was exactly the kind of venue my brother Marcus had always wanted. Vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, white linen draped over every surface. It cost $42,000 for the weekend. I knew because I had quietly arranged the discount through a hospitality contact 3 months earlier, saving my parents $11,000 they didn't know they'd saved. That was the thing about my family. They never knew what they didn't know about me. 93 people filled the rehearsal dinner that Friday evening. Extended family from both coasts, Marcus's college friends, the in-laws, the wedding party, my parents at the center of it all like they were the ones getting married. I sat near the back of the head table wearing a dress I'd bought 3 years ago, nursing a glass of sparkling water, watching my family perform their favorite version of themselves for an audience. I had arrived knowing what tonight would become. My attorney, David Chin, sat 2 tables back in a charcoal suit. Raymond Okafor, the forensic accountant my firm had retained 6 weeks earlier, sat beside him with a leather briefcase that hadn't left his hand since he'd walked in. Nobody in my family had noticed them. Nobody in my family ever really noticed me. My name is Claire Sutton. I am 34 years old. I am a senior portfolio director at Arrowwood Capital Management, where I oversee a $340 million institutional investment fund. I have appeared twice in financial trade publications, once on a regional business journal cover, and last year was named to my state's Business Leaders Under 40 list. I drive a modest car, live in a 2-bedroom condo, wear the same rotation of work blazers, and have never once mentioned any of this to my family. Not because I was ashamed, because I was watching. My father raised his glass before the appetizers arrived. He was a tall man with silver hair and the easy confidence of someone who had spent 62 years believing the world owed him its attention. "To Marcus," he said warmly, and everyone smiled. Then he paused, that particular pause I had learned to dread since childhood, and added, "And to this family. A family that pulls together. That sacrifices for each other." His eyes swept the table and landed on me for exactly 1 second, flat and pointed, before moving on. "Some of us more than others." Polite laughter. My aunt nodded. My cousin Rachel raised her glass with a little too much enthusiasm. My mother leaned toward her sister beside her and said at a volume calibrated for the surrounding tables, "Claire has always been the selfish one. Marcus gives everything. She just takes." I picked up my water glass and took a slow sip. Marcus, to his credit, looked briefly uncomfortable. Then his fiancée Jennifer touched his arm, and he redirected his attention to her like a compass finding north. Marcus wasn't cruel. He was simply a person who had never once questioned the story our parents told about our family, because that story had always made him the hero. The appetizers arrived. Conversation spread across the room. My Uncle Raymond cornered me before the second course. "Still at that investment job?" he asked, with the specific tone reserved for hobbies people haven't outgrown. "Still there," I said. "Making decent money?" "Enough," I said. He nodded in that pitying way and moved on. I glanced back at David Chin. He gave me the smallest nod. Raymond Okafor was already organizing papers in the briefcase on his lap. I had chosen tonight deliberately. Not out of cruelty. Out of precision. Tonight my brother would be surrounded by everyone who mattered to him. Tonight my parents would be performing their most polished version of themselves. Tonight was the only night in 6 years that every single person who needed to hear this would be in one room. I had waited 6 years. I could wait until dessert. To understand tonight, you have to understand where I started. I grew up the second child in a household that ran on a very specific mythology. Marcus was the gifted one, the social one, the one who lit up rooms. I was quiet, studious, careful with money in a way my parents found vaguely suspicious, as though frugality were a character flaw rather than a discipline. My father owned a mid-sized landscaping company. My mother ran the household and occasionally helped with his books. We were comfortable, not wealthy but stable. Or so I believed until I was 19. That was the year I got a full academic scholarship to study finance at State University. My parents threw a small party. My father gave a toast. 3 weeks later, he asked if I could defer my scholarship stipend to him directly, just to help cover some things. I was 19. I said yes. I didn't understand then what I was agreeing to. I thought I was being a good daughter. I graduated in 3.5 years, passed my Series 65 licensing exam 4 months after graduation, and landed an analyst position at a regional investment firm. I was 23, making $58,000 a year, and my father had by then normalized a monthly conversation in which he described some financial pressure, and I quietly helped fill the gap. At 25, I moved to Arrowwood Capital. My salary doubled. My responsibilities grew. And somewhere along the way, the monthly helping became monthly transfers. The amounts grew. The requests became more sophisticated, not just cash flow but my name on documents, my signature on applications, forms that arrived already filled out that I signed without reading carefully enough. I was 27 the first time I noticed something wrong. My credit score dropped 41 points in a single month. I pulled my report and found a loan application filed 3 weeks earlier. A $47,000 personal loan through a regional bank I didn't recognize in my name with my social security number, approved and disbursed to an account I had never opened. I called my mother first. She said I must have forgotten. I called my father. He said it must be a bank error. I called the bank. They had a signed application. The signature looked enough like mine that it passed initial review. I hired a private attorney. I began keeping records. That was the beginning of 6 years of watching. I did not cut off my family immediately. I continued helping, genuinely, willingly, because I understood their financial pressures were real, and because some part of me needed to be sure before I did anything irreversible. Every dollar I transferred, I documented. Every request I fulfilled, I recorded. Every wire, every check, every Venmo, every cash withdrawal I could verify, logged in a spreadsheet that grew more detailed with every passing quarter. While I logged, I climbed. By 30, I was managing a $140 million subfund. By 32, I was promoted to senior portfolio director. By 33, the fund had grown to $340 million under my direct oversight. I received a performance bonus last year of $780,000 pre-tax. My personal investment portfolio, built quietly over a decade of disciplined allocation, was worth just over $2.1 million. My family believed I was doing fine at a desk job. Comfortable but unremarkable. They had no reason to believe otherwise because I had never corrected them. I wasn't hiding. I was building a case. When Marcus announced his engagement 11 months ago, I knew the timeline was closing. Wedding planning would mean financial pressure on my parents. Financial pressure would mean new requests. New requests in the current climate meant new exposure. And I had been patient long enough. 6 weeks before the rehearsal dinner, I retained Raymond Okafor. Raymond was a forensic accountant with 22 years of experience, a background in financial fraud investigation, and a reputation for finding things that people believed were well hidden. I gave him my records, my credit reports from the past 6 years, the loan applications I had filed disputes on, the account statements, the wire transfer logs, every document I had kept in a fireproof box under my home office desk. He called me 10 days later. His voice, when he told me what he'd found, was professionally neutral in the way that people trained to deliver devastating findings learn to be. Ms. Sutton, he said, the total documented financial support is $483,000 over 71 months. The fraudulent instruments, loans, credit lines, one forged co-signature on a vehicle financing agreement, total $218,000 across 14 separate instruments. Some have been partially serviced. Several are still active. I was quiet for a moment. Is the evidence complete enough? I asked. It is thorough enough, he said, that no one in that room will be able to credibly dispute a single line item. I called David Chin the next morning. We filed preliminary dispute paperwork with 2 lenders, put 3 federal fraud complaints on record with supporting documentation, and arranged for everything to be presented formally at a time and place of my choosing. I chose the rehearsal dinner. The main course was a choice of filet or salmon. I ordered the salmon. Around me, the conversation had warmed into the comfortable, performative generosity of people who knew they were being observed. My uncle was telling a story about Marcus at 14. Jennifer's mother was laughing at something my father had said. My father stood up for the second time that evening. I recognized the posture. Chin slightly lifted, glass in hand, the particular way he drew breath when he intended to hold a room. I set down my fork. I want to say something, he announced, and conversations quieted. About family. About what it means to be a Sutton. He looked at Marcus first, warmly. Then at my mother. Then slowly around the table. This family has always supported each other. Through hard times. Through sacrifice. Some of you know how much we've carried as parents. How much we've given. He paused. And some people, he said, not quite looking at me but not quite not looking at me, sit back and let others carry the weight. They take. They don't contribute. They make it about themselves. He shook his head with practiced sorrow. It's embarrassing, frankly. At a time like this. When family should come first. 93 people heard this. Several nodded. My aunt reached over and touched my mother's hand sympathetically. Rachel was looking at me with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite satisfaction. My mother added without standing, she has never once put this family first. Never. 6 years and she's contributed nothing. We don't even know what she does with her money. I heard David Chen's chair shift behind me. I looked at my father calmly. Are you finished? I asked. He blinked. He had expected tears or silence, or the tight-lipped smile I had spent years offering as a peace offering. He had not expected that question asked in that tone in front of 93 people. I'm saying what needs to be said, he replied. Good, I said. I turned slightly and made eye contact with David. Whenever you're ready. David rose. Raymond Okafor rose beside him, briefcase in hand. They walked to the front of the room together. The chandelier light caught the brass clasp on Raymond's briefcase as he set it on the corner of the head table and unfastened it with 2 precise clicks. The room had gone the specific kind of quiet that precedes something irreversible. My name is Raymond Okafor, Raymond said. His voice was calm and unhurried. I am a certified forensic accountant retained by Ms. Claire Sutton. With your permission, I'll be presenting a financial summary. He opened the folder. Page 1, Raymond said, sliding the first document across the table toward my father, who had not sat back down and now looked as though he didn't know how to. Wire transfers. 71 months. January of the year Ms. Sutton turned 28 through last month. He placed a second copy in front of my mother. The document was clean, precise, formatted with Raymond's characteristic efficiency. Each row, date, amount, destination account, description. Color-coded by category. Mortgage support in blue. Utilities in green. Vehicle payments in orange. Medical expenses in red. Miscellaneous transfers in gray. Total verified wire transfers and direct payments, Raymond said, come to $283,000. This includes 41 mortgage payments at an average of $2,100 per payment, 38 months of utility coverage averaging $620 per month, and 63 months of vehicle financing payments across 2 vehicles. Jennifer's mother had stopped smiling. Marcus was very still. Raymond turned to page 2. Additionally, Miss Sutton provided the following lump sum contributions. He read without inflection. A $38,000 tuition payment for a professional certification program. A $100,000 capital injection into Sutton Landscaping LLC in the spring 3 years ago, characterized in the company accounts as an investor loan, though Miss Sutton received no loan agreement, no interest and no repayment. He paused. And $62,000 in what appear to be emergency family expenses over 4 years, individually disbursed in amounts between $1,800 and $14,000. My father had sat down. I wasn't certain when it had happened. Combined documented voluntary support, Raymond said, totals $483,000 over 6 years. The room was silent enough that I could hear the fountain running in the courtyard outside. Raymond turned to page 3. This, he said, and his voice did not change, is a summary of financial instruments opened in Miss Sutton's name without her documented consent. My mother made a sound. 14 instruments, Raymond continued. 3 personal loans through separate regional lenders. 1 home equity line of credit initiated against Miss Sutton's former residence during a period when she held title. 4 credit card accounts. 1 vehicle financing agreement bearing a co-signature that forensic handwriting analysis indicates is inconsistent with Miss Sutton's authenticated signature samples. And 5 additional loan applications, 3 of which were approved and funded, 2 of which were rejected by the lenders. He placed the handwriting analysis on the table. 2 pages, clinical and specific, with the co-signature displayed at 400% magnification alongside 16 verified authentic signatures for comparison. Total value of fraudulent instruments, Raymond said, is $218,000. Of that, $143,000 remains outstanding across currently active accounts. Ms. Sutton's credit was materially impacted for a period of approximately 3 years as a result of delinquencies on accounts she was unaware she held. David Chen spoke for the first time. Dispute filings and fraud complaints have been submitted to the relevant lenders and to the appropriate federal bureau. Those are reference numbered at the bottom of page 3. He was addressing the table as a whole but looking at my parents. We are not here tonight to pursue criminal charges. That decision remains with Ms. Sutton and is currently deferred. Tonight is informational. My father opened his mouth. Dad, I said quietly. Please don't. He closed it. I had imagined this moment many times in the past 6 years. I had imagined feeling something large and hot, rage, grief, the specific pain of having been used by people who were supposed to love you. What I actually felt was something closer to clarity. Clean like a window after rain. I want to be very specific, I said, standing, so there is no confusion later about what was said tonight. I looked at my father first, then my mother, then let my eyes move across the table to my aunts, my uncle, my cousin Rachel with her glass frozen halfway to her mouth. I have supported this family financially for 6 years. Not occasionally. Consistently. Monthly. Every year across every category Raymond just described. I did this willingly because I believed family meant something, and because I was still giving you the benefit of the doubt about things I should have confronted sooner. I paused. I also documented every dollar. Every transfer. Every request. Every conversation. Because 6 years ago I found a loan in my name I hadn't taken, and I had the sense to start keeping records instead of pretending it was a mistake. Marcus was looking at me with an expression I hadn't seen on his face in a long time. It was the expression of someone recalibrating everything they thought they knew. I'm not selfish, I said. I am finished. Those are different things. My father tried twice more that evening to regain some form of control over the narrative. The first time he pushed back his chair and said with the voice he used when he intended to be authoritative, "This is not the time or place for this, Claire. This is your brother's celebration." "You made it the time and place," I said, "when you called me selfish in front of 93 people. I'm simply responding." The second time he said, "Those loan documents are not what they look like. There are explanations." "I'm sure there are," David said pleasantly from his position slightly behind my right shoulder. "The relevant federal bureau has been furnished with all documentation and will be in contact to hear them." Jennifer's father, a quiet man named Gerald who had not spoken once during the altercation, walked to Marcus, put a hand on his son-in-law's shoulder and said, "Take Jennifer somewhere and sit down, son." It wasn't unkind. It was decisive. Marcus and Jennifer left the table. Several guests quietly followed. My mother was crying. Not the grief kind, the cornered kind, the tears that come when a story you've told for years suddenly has an opposing document set. My aunt, my father's sister, turned to him and said in a low voice, "Carl, what is she talking about?" "The loans." "What loans?" And the look my father gave her was the answer she had been hoping not to receive. Rachel set her glass down and did not pick it up again. I had one more thing to do. I turned to Raymond. "The secondary folder, please." Raymond reached into the briefcase and produced a second, thinner folder which he placed in front of me. I opened it and slid the first page toward my parents. "This is a notice of termination of all ongoing financial support," I said. "Effective Monday. The mortgage transfer cancels. The utility autopay cancels. The vehicle financing transfers cancel. All of it. Simultaneously." My mother looked up. "Claire, we can't cover." "I know," I said. "That's the point. You've structured your finances around my support for 6 years without ever acknowledging that my support existed. I'm giving you this notice in writing in front of witnesses, so that when Monday arrives and the accounts reflect the change, no one can claim they were surprised." I closed the folder. "I love Marcus," I said. "I genuinely wish him and Jennifer a happy marriage. I will not be attending the wedding tomorrow because I think it's better for everyone if tonight is allowed to settle before we're in the same room again. I've already spoken to Jennifer privately and explained this, and she understands." I looked at my brother's empty chair. "Tell him I said congratulations." I picked up my clutch. David collected the remaining briefing materials from Raymond. Raymond closed his briefcase with the same 2 precise clicks. I walked out of the Grandview estate into an October night that was cooler than I expected, and I stood in the parking lot for a moment and breathed. My phone began registering missed calls at 7:14 the following morning. My father, 4 calls by 9 a.m. My mother, 7 calls. My Aunt Patricia, who had never in my memory called me directly, twice. Rachel inexplicably once. I answered none of them Saturday. I had told David to monitor for anything requiring a legal response. Everything else could wait. I spent Saturday doing ordinary things. I went to the farmer's market. I made soup. I read for 2 hours in the afternoon. I was aware, distantly, that my absence from Marcus's wedding was unfolding in real time 40 minutes away, and I let that awareness exist without pulling on it. Sunday morning Marcus called. I answered. He was quiet for a moment before he spoke. The mortgage payment bounced, he said. Mom called me at the reception. I didn't know you were paying their mortgage, Claire. I know, I said. I didn't know any of it. His voice was careful, the way people speak when they're trying to be accurate rather than persuasive. I thought you and Dad just had a thing. A personality thing. He made sure of that, I said, not unkindly. Was it all true? The numbers. Every line item is sourced, I said. Raymond's report has the backup documentation for each entry. David can get you a copy. A long silence. I'm sorry, Claire. I know, I said again. Congratulations on your marriage. Jennifer is wonderful. Take care of her. I didn't stay on the line long enough for it to become something more complicated than that. By Sunday evening, David had forwarded me a notification from one of the lenders. My fraud dispute on the $47,000 personal loan, the one that had started everything 6 years ago, had been resolved in my favor. The account was being closed and the fraudulent instrument was being removed from my credit profile. 2 more disputes were still pending. Monday morning arrived. The transfers canceled at 8 a.m. as scheduled. By 10 a.m. my mother had called 11 times. By noon my father had left a voicemail, his voice tight and strange, stripped of the public warmth he usually maintained, asking me to call him back. By 2 p.m., David received contact from a lender informing him that the mortgage account on my parents' home had been flagged for non-payment review, which would escalate to formal delinquency proceedings within 30 days without a payment arrangement. I did not call my parents back. David sent them a certified letter instead, outlining my position, the documentation on file, and the contact information for the relevant federal bureau's open case file. The letter noted, specifically, that any further financial requests directed to me would be logged and potentially added to the existing fraud record. I read the draft, approved it, and went back to work. 3 weeks after the rehearsal dinner, my Aunt Patricia called again. This time I answered. She wasn't calling to defend my parents. She was calling because she was one of the people who had nodded when my father called me selfish that night, and she was a woman honest enough to be troubled by that. I didn't know, she said. None of us knew what you were carrying. I know, I said. That was partly by design. His design. He's telling people it's exaggerated, that the accountant got the numbers wrong. He can tell people that, I said. The documents are what they are. Pause. Are you okay, Claire? It was the first time in the entirety of this situation that someone had asked me that. I sat with it for a second. I'm better than I've been in 6 years, I said, and I meant it precisely. My parents retained an attorney of their own in the 4th week. David spoke with him twice. The posture was defensive. They were trying to understand their exposure, not mount any kind of counterclaim, which told me everything I needed to know about what their attorney had advised them when he reviewed the documentation. The federal fraud case remained open. I had not pushed for acceleration and I had not withdrawn the complaints. That door stayed open quietly for as long as it needed to. Marcus and Jennifer returned from their honeymoon 5 weeks after the wedding. He called me from the airport. He had spoken to my parents during the trip. Once, briefly. He had also, he told me, reviewed Raymond's summary document that David had sent him. Dad told me growing up that you didn't help, he said. That you kept everything for yourself. That you were selfish with money. I know. I repeated that, he said. To people. For years. I repeated something I never verified. You believed your father, I said. Most people do. I'd like to have dinner, he said. Just us. If you're willing. I thought about it for a moment. Marcus was not the villain of this story. He was a person who had been handed a narrative and had never had reason to question it. That was a different kind of culpability than what my parents carried, and I was precise enough to recognize the difference. Yes, I said. Pick a place. I did not reconcile with my parents. I want to be clear about that because these stories sometimes end with a softening that the facts don't warrant. My father called me selfish in front of 93 people while I had been quietly funding his household for 6 years. My mother used my name and credit to take out loans she never intended to acknowledge. These are not misunderstandings that heal with an apology and a Sunday dinner. The federal case remained open. My credit was slowly being restored. 2 of the 4 major disputes were resolved in my favor within 60 days of filing. The remaining 2 were pending. What I had was this: 6 years of documentation, a forensic accountant's report precise enough to hold up to scrutiny, an attorney who had never once told me I was being too careful, and a very clear conscience. I also had my work, which I was good at. I had my fund, which continued to grow. I had a Saturday morning routine at the farmer's market. I had a best friend named Dana who had known about all of this from year 2 and had never once told me to let it go. I had, quietly and without ceremony, built a life that was entirely mine. I had not been hiding. I had been watching. I had been building. I had been waiting for the moment when the truth would be more powerful than the story my family had told about me. And then I had prepared for that moment with the same precision I brought to everything else in my life. My father had called me selfish. I had called a forensic accountant. We both got what we deserved.